recently been rewatching one of my favorite movies, The Accountant. This 2016 film starring Ben Affleck was all about an autistic person who works for the mob. He's not like other autistic people. He's a cool, badass autistic people who kills people.
Guns don't kill people. I kill people with gunpowder.
And I thought to myself, wow, this film makes a lot of similar choices to the 2021 film by Sia, Music. You remember Music? Thanks, I hate it. If these two films make such similar choices, I thought to myself, why do I like one but absolutely hate the other? Is this misogyny? I'm not going to pretend like misogyny doesn't impact the way that I received Music as a film. After all, when women fail in the entertainment industry, they are punished far more severely than men are who make the same mistakes. Looking at you, Julie Taymor, you deserved better and I will stand by that. But I don't really think that misogyny is the main aspect as to why The Accountant works but Music doesn't. Instead, I think it's more that one has a very competent director with a lot of experience and a better understanding of autism, while the other film is...
Music?
a patronizing mess. But let's go into detail and analyze The Accountant versus Music. Spoilers ahead for both Music and The Accountant. Okay, look, let's be 100% honest. The casting in both of these movies is ableist. Neither one of these films features an autistic actor playing an autistic person. And this is despite the fact that autistic people have been in this business for decades. This in and of itself is ableist. Point blank period. But why does one feel slightly less ableist? Well, for one, it comes down to choices made by the actors. Maddie Ziegler, given that she is young and inexperienced, that's not a dig, that's just a fact, made the choice to use YouTube videos of autism meltdowns as her research and inspiration for the character of Music. This is almost always going to give you an inaccurate view of autism. Because when you do this, you're only looking at an autistic person in their absolute worst moments.
It was just... Hey, it's okay. Music, it's okay.
And if that's all you've got for inspiration, you don't know how to portray the best moments when they come.
Want to give it a spin?
Maddie, just due to the fact that she's young and inexperienced, doesn't yet have the acting chops to take an ableist part and really disappear into it in a way that doesn't come off as patronizing. Ben Affleck, on the other hand, is notorious for his research or lack thereof when taking on roles.
I am gonna prepare for this as thoroughly as Ben Affleck prepares for a role.
Whoa, I gotta be Henry VIII in 20 minutes. Hello, 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 hello. Got it.
And in a way, it actually works out to the benefit here.
Do you like it? I made it myself.
No, not particularly, but...
Because he doesn't come across as somebody who's trying to portray autism. He comes across as somebody who's just trying to exist autistically in the world. His performance doesn't feel patronizing because he simply just woke up one day and said, how would I look or act if I felt really uncomfortable all of the time? And it worked. Now, to be fair, it doesn't sit quite right to compare Maddie Ziegler's Music with Ben Affleck's Christian Wolf, as Music clearly has much higher support needs than Christian does. So why don't we look at another character in The Accountant who does have significantly higher support needs and is less verbal? The character of Justine, portrayed by Allison Wright, who is also not autistic. Once again, being an actress of more experience, she's able to portray autistic traits in a way that doesn't come off as patronizing. It doesn't feel like she's making fun of autistic people and our mannerisms. It doesn't feel like a character. Hell, I even had to Google whether or not she was actually autistic because her performance felt so believable to me. Is it still ableism? Yes. But it's not patronizing ableism in the way that makes it feel like we're being made fun of. You may be asking yourself, why do I keep bringing up the fact that Maddie Ziegler is young and inexperienced? And it's not without reason. Her inexperience as an actor is what leads to mistakes like this. But I don't think that they should be career-ending mistakes, nor do I think they will be. Due to the constantly changing stories surrounding Maddie's casting, I legitimately have no idea if she wanted to take the part or not. And honestly, at this point, I don't care. But as someone who has made many a mistake in my career as an entertainer, I think that she is nowhere near beyond redemption. And I legitimately hope to see her do better work in the future, which she has done since. Plus, yeah, dude, that was ableist, my bad, would be really nice. Both The Accountant and Music, despite being films about autistic people, largely feature scenes that make the films inaccessible to autistic people. These scenes include loud noises and flashing lights, which are not only overstimulating, but for autistic people that have comorbid disabilities that involve seizures, both epileptic and non-epileptic, this makes it completely inaccessible for those audiences to watch. Which begs the question, can you really claim that a movie is for a community if it is completely inaccessible to them?
I made this for you! Now why don't you grow up?
Because at that point, it's not for the community at all. But more to the point, why does Music get so much flack for this while The Accountant is ignored? Well, it has to do with story and stylism. The scenes in which The Accountant feature flashing lights and loud noises are completely necessary to the plot. Christian was raised by an abusive father who gave him submersive therapy, if you can even call it that, to teach him how to mask himself in a neurotypical society.
Bright lights bother him. He needs more of it, not less. The world is not a sensory-friendly place, and that's where he needs to learn to live.
Christian carries this abuse with him into adult life and continues to purposefully overstimulate himself as a form of learning to tolerate distress, and eventually, as the film reveals, as a form of self-harm. This is integral to the plot because it shows how Christian became the somewhat dangerous man that he is, how his father built him to be a machine rather than a person with feelings. Music, however, has these flashing and overstimulating scenes as a result of stylism rather than a necessary plot element. These moments are done largely through musical numbers that show how music sees the world in her head. But I have to ask, if she's autistic, why would she see the world in a way that is largely overstimulating for her? Well, the simple answer is, Sia puts stylism over narrative structure, which is completely up to her choice as a director, but also falls away from how being a musical works into the plot. But not only that, it also reflects a complete lack of understanding of how autism works when you examine the lyrics of the film's opening number, Oh Body, which reads,
In my dreams, my body does not control me.
The problem with that is that it approaches autism as a disorder of the body when, in actuality, autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. Neuro meaning brain. If you take an autistic brain out of an autistic body and put it in another body, you're just going to make another autistic person. And considering the 3 years of research that Sia did, you would think that she would understand that. But I don't actually think she ever spoke to a real expert on autism. The characters Braxton and Kazoo, or rather Zoo for short, are really similar in the sense that they're both ableist. But one of these characters is completely unlikable, disrespectful, irredeemable, and the other is a murderer. Braxton is literally the head of a private mercenary company who kills multiple people throughout The Accountant, including one of his own guys. And half of these people are presumably innocent. Yet he is still far more likable than Zoo. When Braxton is finally revealed as Christian's brother, the two fight, and Braxton blames Christian for their father's death.
It's your fault that Pop's dead, you hear me? It's your fault.
All while calling him,
You weird fuck!
having been an autistic person with ableist siblings, this scene brings me to tears every time. Zoo is somehow even worse, mostly because she doesn't seem to see music as a human being. Hell, she even admits gleefully to a social worker that she would like to just abandon her sister.
But like, what if I wasn't here?
But you are there.
But what if I wasn't?
But you are.
But what if I wasn't?
Or states to other characters that she's just willing to drop music off at the People Pound.
I was actually planning on sending her to the People Pound later, but guess I'll keep her a little longer.
The sentiment there is the biggest difference between Braxton and Zoo. Braxton sees Christian as a brother,
Yes, you do, because I love you. You're my brother.
while Zoo sees music as a pet. Braxton calls Christian a freak not because he believes it, but because Christian immediately disappeared for 10 years following the death of their father. Braxton has a legitimate reason to be upset here. And siblings raised in an abusive household are not exactly known for getting their feelings out in the most healthy ways possible. And after this fight, Braxton reveals that the biggest thing that hurt him in this situation was not even that Christian was the reason their father died, but it was because when Christian was in trouble, he didn't call him, despite Braxton trying his hardest to always have Christian's back.
You call me. I'm your brother. I've always had your back.
Throughout the film, Braxton always has Christian's back. Braxton never had to learn that Christian was a human being. Christian was never anything other than his brother. And he tells him that he loves him. Throughout all of music, I don't think Zoo ever says the words, "Music, I love you,"
And I'm actually learning how to love.
or "Music, I'm sorry." Zoo learns that music is human, but still doesn't treat her as one. Music is a burden to Zoo, one that she eventually learns to cope with.
Can't believe I'm related to these people.
I'm not saying any family has to be perfect. Lord knows that does not make for dynamic or entertaining media. But what matters most in an abusive dynamic is the framing surrounding the dysfunction. If you're framing dysfunction in a way that positively shines light on abuse, you run the risk of justifying it. Both Music and The Accountant show examples of abusive family dynamics that involve an autistic person. And once again, The Accountant is better at the ways in which it frames the dynamic. As I mentioned before, Zoo and Music's relationship is abusive. It's neglectful, and it's both physically and emotionally abusive. Zoo consistently tells Music that she is not worth much to her, constantly talks about her like she's not in the room.
I almost gave Music away to strangers today. I almost left her.
And even puts Music in the prone restraint, which is physical abuse. Some of these things Zoo does outgrow throughout her recovery from alcoholism, but the film never admits or frames the behavior shown before as abusive. In fact, when Music is put in the prone restraint, it's treated as though it's the right thing to do. It's treated as though it's this magical thing done that helps her.
You're not hurting her, are you?
No, I am not. I am crushing her with my love.
When in actuality, this would likely cause severe harm, traumatization, or in a worst case scenario, it could kill her. The Accountant, however, actively frames and names their father's parenting style as abuse. Braxton holds their father accountable for all of the trauma that him and Christian experienced throughout their childhood. Other people in their lifetime call out their father's behavior and parenting as abuse.
They're not done.
Tomorrow is another day. They have done their best.
He never listens and continues to abuse his children, but the film never frames what he did as good. It frames it more like traumatic beginnings of a superhero's journey. Should it have happened? No. but would the story have worked without it? Also no. With the father's abusive dynamic, we got to see the real reason why Christian pushes people away. It's not because of the autism. It's because his father raised him to believe that he was not worthy of love or affection from others, and that no one other than his brother would accept him. It's not disability, it's the abuse. And speaking of abuse, we've got to talk about the restraint scenes because both films use them, and say it with me, The Accountant does it better. First, let me say, you should never restrain an autistic person unless it is the absolute last resort. And you should especially never use restraints in the ways that music does. In not one, but 2 scenes, music shows an example of what is known as the prone restraint, where a person is being held face down with another person's body weight on top of them. This is the deadliest form of restraint. This should never have been included in the film, especially not with a grown adult restraining a child like that. And what's even worse than including these scenes in the film, without warning despite it being promised, by the way, what's worse is that it's clear Sia understands that autistic people are often restrained, but she does not understand why. If restraints are being used properly, they are only used when an autistic person is causing harm to themselves or those around them. And in the film, the character music does neither of those things. She's just having a meltdown. By contrast, the singular scene in The Accountant, which does show an autistic person being restrained, uses the ethical version of a restraint. Christian is having a severe meltdown in which he is destroying the environment around him, which could lead to harm to his brother who is in the same room. His father then immediately restrains him by hugging him tightly from behind with his arms crossed over his chest while he whispers an auditory stim in Christian's ear. None of the father's body weight are on Christian. It's more akin to a hug than anything else. Christian is at no risk of being harmed here. And the film never shows this happening again. This scene was included to show Christian at his worst in his childhood. For many autistic people, myself included, this is similar to real life. This restraint was done as a means of protecting Christian from harming himself or his brother. Whereas in music, it's just done to shut her up.
Music.
Do that thing.
I'm not climbing on top of a small screaming white girl in the middle of this park. It's your turn.
Last but not least, let's talk about the framing. I think the biggest reason why music failed while The Accountant succeeded has everything to do with the framing. Who's telling the story? In music, it's very clear that despite the title being literally her name, the story is not about music at all. It's about Kazoo. Music is the audience's through character through which we see the lens of Zoo's life. The Accountant, however, is entirely Christian's story. Christian doesn't have a lot of growth, but he does grow. The story is about him and his life and how his abusive father affected his life as an autistic adult. It's his film, through and through. This is actually a really uncommon framing in film and media surrounding autism. More often than not, it's very much not the autistic person's story, but the caregiver's story. It's about a caregiver learning to see an autistic person for more than just a disability. We don't often get to see autistic people work through their own internalized ableism and wonder where that came from. And I would like to see more films like that. Side note, one last thing I forgot to include when I wrote out this script, one of the things that works the most about The Accountant is the fact that it includes an autistic person with low support needs who can live on their own and an autistic person with high support needs while focusing on that autistic person's autonomy. Justine is nonverbal. She will never be able to live on her own in society, but she is just as badass as Christian. We never get to see films like that. That's such a balanced look at autism. It doesn't say that any autistic person is more worthy than the other. It says that each autistic person has their own unique things that they bring to the table, and I love that. All in all, I think that music did everything that people were worried The Accountant would do back in 2016. But with The Accountant, instead of getting a full-length feature version of Simple Jack,
Simple Jack, the story of a mentally impaired farmhand who can talk to animals, was a box office disaster that many critics called one of the worst movies of all time.
we got something more akin to Autistic John Wick. And I'm really here for that. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's definitely mine. I wish more filmmakers would learn from films like that and grow. I hope the sequel does eventually come out, and I hope that they cast actually autistic actors in it. Me. Cast me. I'm an actually autistic actor and a stunt woman. Cast me, Warner Brothers. I'm available. I'm always available. I will do it for 2 cents. Cast me. I'm desperate. That is all I have for today. Please consider liking and subscribing. Also, if you like videos like this and would like to see more of them, consider supporting me on Patreon. You get to decide what I talk about next, and you get to interact with me in real time and laugh at me because I am what the experts know as an autistic bimbo. If you can't support me on Patreon, please just consider giving this a like and subscribing, because the majority of people who watch my videos don't subscribe for some reason. Go ahead and type down in the comments anything that you'd like to see me do in the future or take a look at. Have a wonderful day. Bye!